Hey fellas, I finished up the M113 last night, or finished the build. Now I'm going to start painting. But I thought I'd do a quick video on a review of the kit and what I think of it. Keep in mind that I don't typically build armor. I've only built a couple. And this is the first full resin kit that I've built, other than like figure kits. So this was quite a challenge for me. So this is merely my opinion. I couldn't find a whole lot out there on the on this specific kit, and I see why, because it's a very difficult kit to build. We'll go through the pros and cons in my opinion, and again, take that with a grain of salt because I don't build too many tanks. Or armor, I should say, because I don't think technically this is a tank. But we'll take a look at what I got and what I did to it, and then the next video I have, I'll get to painting it. So I've got allergies today. My allergies have been killing me. So here we go. All right, there it is. Get a look at it. Back. Now, I did a little bit of scratch building. The kit supplies you with a lot of different materials, and they supplied me with a rope for the back, for the tow cable. But instead of that, what I did is I took 3 strands of lead wire and twisted them, and made the tow cable out of lead wire. I think it looks a little more realistic. The back hatch, the owner wanted it open, but I figured if you ever wanted to close it, what I did, I put all the hinges. I made all the hinges operable, but I made the back hinge operable, and I also put 2 little magnets up here, and they'll get covered with paint, so you won't be able to see them, or they won't stand out. But you can close it, and it'll stay closed, just in case he wants to have it closed. You can see down in there, it's kind of dark. But yeah, I added, I took strips of tape and made little hand grab thingamabobs on the inside. I also added some lead wire for a headphone cord coming down that I've seen on reference pics. But I'm really proud of the interior. I think it looks really good. Open up the front. Yeah, we got all of them open. So I did that. The kit supplies you with lead foil, and I've never used lead foil, but I've heard a lot of modelers using it. And I used it for these little dealies here, straps. And I really like it. It's kind of slick, and it doesn't stick real well with glue. But yeah, I like lead foil. Unfortunately, there's some left over, so I can use it. A lot of photo etch. All these little grab handles all over the tank I made with lead wire, and I cut all those little pieces the same length, and then I took my tweezers and smashed down the ends to replicate what it looks like on the real thing. And that was a little off. And then just glued them on. And you know, this isn't perfect. I don't think I've ever built or ever will build a perfect model, but the tank tracks were a chore, and they were individual track links that you had to cut out and glue together. And we'll get into the issues I had with those in a little bit, but overall the tank tracks went on well. The biggest problem that I had was cleaning the flash off of each one. Each one of these track links was basically a solid piece, and I had to cut out. I ended up taking a Dremel tool and just dremeling around where the actual part was, and then cleaning them up with a knife. And I didn't count, but there were a ton of them. I broke probably half a dozen. But fortunately, with the kit, they give you more than you need. So the kit also supplies a bunch of different type materials. They supply 2 different types of mesh to put over the vents. I guess these are vents for the engine room. One thing the kit doesn't supply you with is an engine. Excuse me. And the engine would be right in here. They've got a compartment for it, but they don't supply you with an engine, which I thought was kind of odd since they supply you with everything else. But the owner didn't want the engine compartment opened anyway. So there it is. And all these doors close. One of the biggest pain in the butts was this gun mount. It's all photo etch. And what I did, I wanted to make it so you can take it in and out. For one, it'll be easier to paint that way if I can remove it. Get my camera in here. So what I did is I ended up drilling out the mount, putting in a aluminum tube, and then putting just a size smaller brass tubing into the mount. And that way I could put it in and out just like that, take it in and out. And when I ship it, this is something that could easily break. But manipulating this photo etch was a pain in the butt. It was complicated, and I needed to be sturdy, so what I did is I soldered where it that swivel mounts onto the base for the gun, just to give it a strong bond, because that's something that I figured wouldn't withstand a whole heck of a lot if it was just glued. And I spent a couple hours trying to get that soldered right and ended up screwing it up. My soldering skills suck. But anyway, that's on there. This turret's removable, and I'm going to leave it that way. I don't see any reason to glue it. If the owner wants to glue it, he can glue it. So there's that. The owner supplied me with this ACAV kit, and I'm not real familiar with armor. Again, I'm not real familiar with armor, but I think it's this. The ACAV kit was this like shroud, this armor plating around the turret, and then they also supplied an armor plate, but the vehicle that the owner wanted me to do didn't have that on there that I could find. So I'm just building it the way the picture shows. It also supplies this little shield here for this M60 machine gun. And unfortunately, I either lost the directions or they weren't included, but I couldn't find the directions for those. So I referenced pictures and looked off the picture on the box to try to get these the way they're supposed to go. And I think I got it right. It looks looks like the picture that I had. This little M60 was kind of a pain to do. It comes with a bipod, but the pictures I have with it in here show it without the bipod. So once I get it painted, I assume you can just glue it into that into position. I think that's about it. Oh, yeah, there's some more lead foil. Around the edges, what I did is I filled in all my seams, but then I went back with some Vallejo plastic putty, and I used that to create these weld seams that I saw on my reference pictures that are around there. They may be a little more prominent, but I think once you get it painted, it'll kind of tone them down a little bit. So that's it. let's see, the antennas I made with stretch sprue, and the owner can glue these in whenever he gets it. It's just sprue that I stretched. And then he wanted a flag, so what I did is I cut out the shape of the flag, and then I heated it and bent it to look like it wasn't just a strip of plastic. And I'll paint that with the to represent the Arvin flag. The owner asked if I could recreate this bird emblem to put on the side. I think it was on a specific one. I'm not sure if it was the unit emblem or exactly. I don't know too much about it. But I did find a picture online of not the actual M113, but of a model of this bird logo that goes on the side. So what I did is I blew up the image and scaled it, and then cut it out on my Photoshop program, printed it out, and then took my frisket and just traced around it to make a mask. And then what I'll do when I paint it is I'll put this on, cut it out. I don't typically cut out the frisket mask before I put it on, because this stuff sticks to itself and it's just kind of a pain in the butt. So I'll put it on there and cut it out, and do the same for the other side. I made a couple of them. We'll do that when I get ready to paint. So that is it. We'll go over the pros and cons of this kit here in a second. Alright, so here's the review part. Some of the things I did like about it was all the detail. And, you know, I read some posts online about this kit. And other than that, I mean, I don't know much about it. Or I didn't know much about it until I built it. But to me, it's got a lot of detail. And from the other kits I've seen in different scales, the plastic ones, they just don't have the detail that this one does. And some people say that I saw some comments about it being a little off and inaccuracy, but you know, I'm not one of those guys that you know, that's not my bag. It wouldn't, when it's finished, it's gonna look like an M113, and I think that's all that matters. Little bitty things here and there, and based on the reference pics, I don't see any inaccuracies. But you know, then again, I'm not real that particular about those kind of things. There was a ton of photo etch, and you know, with it being resin, I mean, they can pack a lot of detail in there, and most of the detail was pretty good as far as not being soft. There was a lot of cleanup to do, but once you clean it up, the detail's pretty good. And it's the only one I know of in that size. I mean, it's a big scale. Let's see. There were a lot of different materials, and you know, with me not having worked with a whole lot of resin, you know, I've worked a little bit here and there with like resin aftermarket parts, but again, I've never done a full resin kit. But not only with the resin, they supply you with all the different kinds of materials that almost all of them that you need to build the kit. Some of the cons: resin. I hate it. I hate dealing with resin. It's hard to clean up. You got to wear a respirator whenever you sand it, because you don't want to get that dust in your lungs. And those tracks, that took me 2 days to clean up those tracks, all of them, and it was just a pain in the butt. In fact, I spent most of my time on the build just cleaning up the parts. And with the big flat pieces, every one of them was warped. So yeah, I had to use the heat gun. Some of the smaller parts I just held over a flame to melt it a little bit, and then I could bend it back into shape. And you know, that wasn't that big of a deal, but it's just one of those things that it's just an extra step that you have to deal with. The fit, I've seen a lot of people comment about the poor fit. and some of that I think is due to the parts being warped, but some of it I think is due to my inexperience with resin kits. And like I said earlier, there aren't like locating notches or locating tabs like you'd see in a typical plastic model. So that I think that has a lot to do with it. And then when you're dealing with big wide pieces like the side of it, like the side right there, you've gotta here, let me grab it. And I'm gonna figure out how to glue some of this stuff back on when I break it off trying to paint it. And if I drop it, I think this thing's just gonna shatter. But this big wide piece right here, you have to actually glue on the underside and then glue that to the base of the tank. And if you don't get those perpendicular to each other, then it's going to be a little off. And I got it pretty close. Once it's built up, you can't really tell. But because it was just a little off, the front fenders here were off as well, so I had to cut those off and scratch build those from plastic card. So that was somewhat my fault. The photo etch, a lot of the photo etch, and it looks good, but it's kind of complicated. I'm not a big fan of photo etch either, and there were a lot of complicated photo etch parts. But other than that, I mean, it builds up, in my opinion, to be a pretty good model. I had to sand off some of the details, and what I did, like this front part right along, reversed, right along here, I had to add these bolt heads. And fortunately with my MAK kits, they come with a lot of these bolts, plastic bolts that you can just cut out. So I always save those. So I just cut those out and added back the detail. On the back, I had to sand this flush because, again, I didn't fit it real well. And there was this plate along back, this white plate. I had to sand that completely off. So I replaced it with plastic card and added the bolts back with the from the MAK kits. I used aluminum tubing for the hinges. They provide you with resin tubes for some of that, but the resin's pretty brittle, and I was afraid and it just didn't seem to fit right. So I decided to go with aluminum and then cover it with plastic tubing to give it a little more girth. And I was afraid that the resin would break if you moved it too much. That's about all the cons that I had. It took me a lot longer than I thought it would. It's only been a week and a half, but it seems like it's been a couple weeks that I've been building this. The tracks, they were a pain, but what I did find, since you put them on each individually, that you can make minor adjustments as you go. And if something was a little off, what I did is I just took a heat gun and heated up that area of the track, and I could bend it just a little bit, and that solved some of that problem. If you go to build this kit, and I think it's a pretty expensive kit. I couldn't find one on eBay, but I'm pretty sure it's an expensive kit, and I don't think it's that easy to find. But now I lost my train of thought. But anyway, it was you just got to take your time with it. I think it looks pretty good. I think once I get it painted, some of those little flaws that are in it will disappear. So I'm going to quit jabbing, and that's basically my review of the kit. It's not for somebody that's inexperienced at modeling, that's for sure. Not that I'm the guru of modeling, but I've built a lot of kits, and I mean, it was pretty difficult to do. So I'll get on with the painting, and I'll see you on the next episode.